a new module that allows you to generate your own custom reports while using large number of the data fields within RoomKey. All of the information that you put into RoomKey is basically stored in fields, and those fields are all stored in what we call records. So there's a big record with lots and lots of fields in it. So what we're allowed to do, you to do in the reports wizard is actually have access to some of those data fields so that you can produce your own reports that could augment the existing reports in RoomKey, or they may even be specific to your property that you have special needs and you need a report to fulfill those needs. So we're going to go through the different steps that are required for you to create your custom report. So the first thing I would do is make absolutely sure that you define the objectives of your report, and in sort of on a piece of paper the basic design of your report, so that you know which fields you're going to need and you know the order in which you want them to appear on your report. And it's just easier if you have a basic outline of the report before you even start. The next thing that we're going to look at is to determine whether it's reservation-based or transaction-based. So in other words, am I just pulling data and I need to sort the data in a different order than I normally get it, or am I looking to actually go into a transaction code or a series of transactions codes and start to pull into my report information that is stored within transactions codes? And if that's the case, then we need to make it transaction-based. The next thing we're going to do is look at the different fields that we can get on your report. So as I said, you have data fields, and those data fields are stored in records, and we have different records that you can access. So you can access the information that would be stored on your reservation. You can access the data that would be stored on your guest folio. If it's a group, we can pull the information from the group master. If we're looking to put balances on our report, so this is a little different than transactions. These are actual full balances. So if I wanted to see the balances of the records, I could pull those as well. I can pull from my corporate setup. I can pull from travel agents. I can pull from wholesalers. And just recently added is custom fields. So if you utilize custom fields at your property, you will now be able to generate reports based on those custom fields. Then we'll talk about how to create an expression. And basically, an expression is a combination of values, constants, variables. There's an operator, which is, equal to, less than, greater than, and then a function. And it basically builds the rules for what we're looking for. So if I was looking for reservations, but within a specific date range, then I would need an expression to define what that date range would be. Then we're going to look at how fields can be printed on our reports. We can look at how we can group fields together to give our report a whole different look. And then we'll look at how we can go about running those reports. So I'm now going to slip over into RoomKey, and we are going to look at where we are going to find our rate wizard. So for those of you that are going to be building reports within your report wizard, I'm sorry, I keep saying rate wizard, in the report wizard. If you click on reports, you should have the ability to go onto the bottom of the screen under report wizard. If for any reason you do not have report wizard, it is a permissions-based function. So you will need to go to your systems administrator and ask them to give you operations 611, and that allows you to go into report wizard and create reports. Now, every clerk should have access to custom reports. So as we go in and we build reports in report wizard, so we're going to look at an example here where we have some reports already built. You'll notice that when you first go into the custom reports, you don't see those reports, but you have the option to load custom reports. So when we load custom reports, it will go out and look at any new reports and any existing reports that are in your report wizard, and it will load them into your custom reports. Once you've loaded it, and you only need to do it once per day basically, when you go back into custom reports, we can now see all of those custom reports that have been loaded into the system. When we load the reports into the system, we can put them into different categories. So what we're seeing here is a list of the categories that the reports are in, and then if we click on the category, then we can actually see the reports that are loaded. So what we're seeing here are the individual reports that have actually been loaded into RoomKey. So let's go back into the report wizard and see how that works. So if we look here, you'll notice that these are the same categories that we just saw when we went in and loaded reports. So when we create a report in RoomKey, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a sample, and we'll kind of look at that sample and go through and see what the report looks like. So I'm going to go in and modify this report so we can see what it looks like. So first of all, when we go into RoomKey, we can assign a name to the RoomKey report. So this, you can put anything that you would like that makes sense to you for your report. The file name you should just leave the same because this is generated by RoomKey, and this is how RoomKey knows what report to run. Then remember we talked a little bit just now about whether it's reservation-based or transaction-based. So I can see that this report, guest profile number of nights report, is a reservations-based report. So in other words, we're looking at all of the potentially past or present and future reports and reservations, and that's what we are going to pull into this report. The category here is that main first listing that we saw that was on the load reports, load custom reports. So you can go in and create as many different categories as you want. For instance, if you're an accountant and there are special reports you want, you could create yourself your own category and call it accounting reports. And then you can put all of your reports together as you create them under the category of accounting reports. Then we have a series of check marks here. Active basically means that this is an active report. If I don't want to use this report anymore, then I can go in and remove the check mark and make it inactive. Show in menu allows this to be shown when the front desk clerk goes in and clicks on load reports. If you have a report that you don't want to use anymore, you can remove it from that menu by simply removing the check mark. And then one of the other things you'll see when I build a new report, I don't actually put it into show menu until I'm comfortable that that report is working properly. When I've built it and I've tested it and I've maybe tweaked it, gone back, tested it again, if I'm getting what I want, then I will go in and now put the check mark in show in menu so that everybody will have access to that report. Landscape. We have two different formats, either portrait or landscape. If there's no check mark in landscape, it will default to a portrait format. If you put a check mark in landscape, it will now be landscape format. If you are pulling reservation information, you know on a RoomKey reservation, you can use the little double-headed icon or the silhouette icon to add additional names to a reservation, commonly referred to as sharers. If you want to include those sharer name on your report, then you can put a check mark in sharer. The omit details will make more sense when we create a report, but when we create a report, we can actually group transactions together. So for instance, if I was pulling a report based on guest number of nights from the guest profile, And I didn't want RoomKey to show me every single reservation, but I just wanted them to show me that there was a total of 25 reservations. If I did omit details, then it would not show me all of the reservations. It would just show me a total count for all of those reservations. Then show counter is going to put a count of all the total number of reservations, despite whether I omit details or not. It's going to show me a count of everything. The description on the bottom doesn't print anywhere, but this is a great place for you to put the report name and then also include what you are trying to achieve with this report. So that if someone else comes in, for instance, you're on holiday and they want to tweak this report or they want to change it somehow, or it's not giving them what they're expecting, they can come in here and read from your description what you're trying to achieve with this report, and maybe it's not what they're looking for, so they need to create a new report. But at least they'll understand what we're trying to achieve with this report. When we click on the next button, what we'll actually be doing is moving through the tabs that are on the top of this screen. So my next tab is going to take me to the header. So on the header, this is what's going to appear on the top of your report. So obviously I want the name to appear on the top of the report. In this case, what I've done is I've added in here property so that we can go in and we can select the property. And then if I wanted to, I could go in and I could add the address if I wanted to and insert the address. If I wanted to have a full address, I could put in the city. And then if I wanted to follow that with a comma and a space and then go in and insert the state and province, I can do that. And what that will do is I can put multiple fields on the same line to build exactly what I want to appear on the top of my report. Then when I go to next, it's going to take me into fields. So these fields are the ones that I was talking about that we have allowed you to have access to. We've grouped them together based on the report that we would find them in, or the record that we would find them in. So if you find them in your reservation somewhere, you will be able to go through here and you will be able to find that field if it appears somewhere on your reservation. So I'm just cycling through some of the fields so you can see the type of things that we would include in here. If you don't find what you're looking for here, you can close down the reservation and maybe we'd find it on the guest profile. So by clicking on the plus sign, you can see here the things that we would usually find in the guest profile. So we have things like loyalty number, salutations, telephone numbers, vehicle information, VIP description. If we don't find it there, if you are pulling something that is relating to a group, you can certainly go in here, and if you needed more than just the group name, but needed the group email address as well, we're going to find that within the group. And again, I'll just cycle through so you can see some of the things that we're pulling out from the group. We can use balances. And again, these are not by individual transaction codes. This would be a payment balance, or all charges, all taxes, the total balance on the folios, a credit card payment, any other payments. But I cannot pull out individual transaction codes here. That's what the transaction-based report will allow you to do. So this is just pulling out basic totals from your reservations. If you needed corporate information, we can add corporate information. And we can use on this side of the screen, we can use a combination from any one of these records. We don't have to just stick with reservations. I could pull out reservations, and if I wanted group information, I could go in here and pull group information across as well. And you're going to find that this information, or this screen, works exactly the same as many of the other RoomKey screens that you're used to, in order to add a field, we simply click on the moving from left to right, and if I want to take it away, I move the right to left. Now, you'll notice that it says to me that by removing a field, it will remove my expression, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later, but you need to make sure that you get the right fields, and this all comes back to the initial planning that you do for your report. Make sure that you've got all the right fields when you first go in and start pulling them across. So we will go through and pull whatever fields we needed. In this case, we've pulled from reservation, guest name, arrival and departure, number of nights, rate name, the actual dollar value of the rate, and the status of the reservation. And I've just added in, if there was a group, I would see the group name from here as well. Once I finish this, I'm moving on to my next step. And the next step is to put together that expression, or basically the series of rules that this report has to follow in order for me to give me the results that I want. So in this case, we're going to build an expression when we build a report, but if we read this expression, it's telling me that if my reservation equals checked out, or my reservation status is reservation, or my reservation status is in-house. So in other words, a no-show or a cancel or checked in will not show up on this report, only if the reservation is checked out, reserved, or in-house. Then when we move on to the next field is the columns that will show up in my report. So these are the different columns that will show up in my report. They will be labeled according to this name here, but you can always go in and change the title if you want to, and change it to, let's say, number of nights. So now just instead of saying nights, the title over that column will actually be number of nights. Then we can also go in and we can put a format in here. So if I didn't want month, day, year, if I click in here, I could go in and it allows me to pick a choice of different date formats. And if I have a column that has money in it, I can go in and I can pick what I want it to look like, whether it has a bracket around it if it's a negative, whether it has decimal places, etc. So I can define the format that I would like it to show on. Now, you'll notice here that my title is longer than 4 characters. So you need to make sure that you pick a title that doesn't necessarily have to meet 4, but now my column is going to auto-adjust itself to be the right size to fit in the whole title. So if you have a report that's kind of tight on your screen, on your piece of paper anyway, you may want to come in and change the sizes of the titles, and or you could go in and change the sizes of your fields. So for instance, in here where my status is 12 characters, I may go in and say I'd like to change that down to 8 characters. So I could just move this and make it slightly smaller. The same with my date. If I go with a smaller date format, so I go with month, day, year, I can get away with that being 8 characters wide rather than having to be 11 characters wide. So there's all sorts of different things that you can do if your report is not fitting onto the piece of paper. You can come in and you can change the title, you can change the format, and you can change the width. The other thing that you can do is you can choose to opt to eliminate columns. So for instance, if I didn't want to include the group anymore, by moving the check mark from the column, I've now stopped that field from printing on my report. Sometimes you'll find when you are creating reports, you need to include fields because you are specifically going to be either sorting on that field or you are going to be using it in your expression. But for instance, if I use status here but all I was looking for was in-house, and in my expression I had said equal to in-house. I don't necessarily need to have that field print on my report, because by virtue of the expression, it's only showing me in-house guests anyway. So I could have gone in here if my report was getting too wide, and I could actually eliminate that column as well if I wanted to. Now, the other thing that I've opted to do is under the number of nights, I want RoomKey to sum those number of nights so that I can actually count the number of nights. So at the beginning of the report, we asked it to count the records in the report. This is actually asking me now to count the number of nights that are in this report. So they're two totally different things. Then when I move on to my next, I can group reservations together if I want to. So I'm grouping these together by guest names. So if I did a wide span of maybe 6 weeks, I may have multiple reservations for the same guest. So in order to make it easier for me, I'm asking RoomKey to group together by guest names. And then the final field is how do I want to sort order this? So within my group names, do I want it to be sorted by arrival date? Would I want it to be sorted by my rate? Do I want to sort it by the status, because it is bringing in 3 different statuses for me, or stati for me? So I could move this across, and now I would be able to order it by my reservations. Now, if I had finished, I would click on finish, and that would save all the changes that I've made. In this case, I'm not going to save my changes. I just wanted to show you how we could do things. But I'm now going to go in, and I'm going to select that report and run it directly from Rate Wizard to see if it's working and giving me what I wanted. So right now, what I can see is that it's run and it's looking for checked out, reservations, or in-house. It's grouping it by guest name. So some of them only have 1 record, and some of them have multiple records. Where they have nights, I was asking it to total my nights. So you'll see in here, it's giving me a total by night. And then if I go down to the bottom of the screen, what I'm going to see is there is a second page on this report. So if I go to my second page, because this is one of 2. Actually, there is no second page. Normally, it would have had a counter on the bottom here to tell me the total number of guests that I had picked, but it appears that it's cut that off for me. But you can see the reservation status on the side here. So if this is what I wanted, and I was happy with this report, and I had built this report, I would have come back into this report and modified it, and then clicked on show in menu, so that I would know that my front desk clerks would be able to go in, and they would be able to now see this report and run this report for themselves. Now, I am going to build a report so that you can see. I am hoping, I've just noticed that I've got someone that said that they lost the audio. Can you all tell me again if you have audio so that I'm not talking to myself? Okay, as long as I'm seeing one of you with an audio, I know that I'm still broadcasting. Okay, thank you. Fantastic, thank you very much. So let's go in and build a new report. So I'm going to go in, and in order to create a new report, I'm going to go back here, and we're going to go into New Reports. So it's going to open up the Report Wizard dashboard for me, and I'm going to be able to see that my report name and my file name are the same. So I'm going to go in here now, and I'm going to change that to put the name of the report that I want to call it. So I'm going to call this one let's pick our custom report fields, which is new for us. So let's call this custom fields for in-house guests. So, custom field for in-house guests. I'm going to make things easier for myself because I'm going to use this in 3 different locations. I'm going to use Control-C and just copy that for me. Now, it's not transaction-based, so I'm going to leave it as reservation-based. I can go in here and pick any of my existing categories, or I could have created a new category. So I'm going to call it Custom Field Reports. Then I'm going to say it's active. I don't think I'm going to need it landscape. I'm pretty sure it will fit in the right portrait for me, but I can always come back and change that. I do want a counter on it. I don't want to omit details, and I don't think I want sharers either. Now I can go in and do Control-V and put the title back in here again. I can go up here and pick my property name. Don't think I want my address, so I'll just leave property in there. I'm going to use the Control-V again to put in my fields, and then I'm going to move to the next field. So, what information do I want in here that's for my custom fields? So first of all, I know that I want to have guest name being my first field. So I'm going to go down here and find my guest name. Now, if I wanted first name and last name, and I wanted it backwards so that the last name showed first and then the first name, if you'll remember, when I went into the guest profile, I actually had the ability to select first name and last name. So that way I could have put last name first and then first name last if that's what I wanted to do. So in this case, guest name is fine for me. So I'm just going to go in and select my guest name. And then I'm going to, let's go back here, so I put my guest name in here. Then I am going to call up my res ID so that if I have multiple reservations, I can identify them by the res ID. Then I'm going to go up, and I think that it would be helpful to me to have my arrival and departure date. So I'm going to move up to the top and see if I can find my arrival and departure date. I could also, if I wanted to, I could add my rate in here. You can just hang on for a second. There we go. So let's go back up and find my arrival and departure date. So here's my arrival date, and I move it across and go down to my departure date. Once I've done my guest reservation arrival and departure date, well, maybe my room would be a good idea. So I go down and find my room and pull it across as well. So now I've got that information. Now, in order to find my custom fields, I need to go down to another record. So I'm going to now open up my custom fields, and this will display whatever custom fields that you have. So I want to pull across their birthday. I also want to pull across their favorite colors. And I also want to pull across any special food needs that they may have. So once I've pulled those across, if there's nothing else that I need, I'm ready to move on to my next tab. So by clicking next, it takes me to my filter. So these are my expressions that I'm looking at. So if I wanted to look at everybody, for instance, arriving for the next week to see their custom fields, I can go up into my guests, and I'm basically looking at my arrival date. but I want to be able to specify a range of arrival dates. So I'm going to go onto Arrival and click on Expression. So I need to look at all of my guests arriving today, future. So they would basically be greater than and equal to whatever date I want to use. And because I want that date to be flexible and I want the clerk to put that date in, I can create something called a parameter. And this parameter now means that when they run this report, a little box will show up on the screen. And whatever I put in the parameter here, that will be the title of that box. So I'm going to put arrivals from, and it's going to be anything that is greater than equal to arrivals from, which is whatever date the front desk clerk puts in. And again, it's still the arrivals, but this time it's going to be less than and equal to, and these are going to be arrivals to. So I've now defined arrivals from and arrivals to. So that will give you the ability to specify a date range when you come to run this report. And then I also want to add in here, let's leave it simple and then we'll come back and make some changes to this. So arrivals to and from. Now I can move on to the next field. So these are all the fields that it's going to show for me. I want to go in and my arrival date, I just want that to show in month, day, year. And the same with my departure, month, day, year. I actually don't think I want to include my departures. I just want to have the arrival date. And then we have birthday, color, and food needs. And I think I'm going to make the birthday, let's say 10 characters. The color will be 8 characters. And the food needs will be 15 characters. So I've been able to define the width that I want for all of my, my fields. Next, I'm going to move on and order by. So if I wanted to order them by, for instance, if I go into my custom field, I wanted to order them by birthdays, and then by let's leave them as birthdays for now. So I'm going to group all of my birthdays together. And I don't really have any particular sort order that I want, maybe by arrival date. So let's go in and say by arrival date. So it's going to group them by birthday. So if I have people that have birthdays on the same date, it will put all of those reservations together. And then within those groupings, it's going to sort it by arrival date. So if I'm happy with this, I can click on Finished, and now it's saved the report for me. So I can go in here and I can now run the report. So when I run the report, this is the parameter that I filled in. So it allows me to select whatever date I would like, and then I can click on OK. And then this is the second parameter that I put in here. So I can now change that, let's say go to the end of the month, and click on OK. And I'm hoping I've got some results that will show up here. So in here, you can see that I do have reservations arriving in that time period, but I'm not necessarily seeing that I had any custom fields in there. So if I had have had custom fields, they would have shown up in here. But this does tell me that my report is too wide because it's cutting off food needs. I can see that in here under my guest name, I probably have way too many characters in here. And you'll also see that I have my record counter on the bottom. And you'll also see that it put the title birthday here because I'm grouping them by the birthdays. So let's go back and make some changes to that report. I'm going to go in here and modify it. Go in here and change the spelling here. I'm going to next, next, and And in here where I have my arrival and departure, I'm going to leave that the same, but I'm going to go to my columns. So I'm going to shorten my guest names down to 20 characters, and that should give me enough room to get my food needs together. So this time I'm going to run on finish. I'm going to finish in here. And now it opens up my parameters for me. I'm actually going to take this back to the beginning of April because I think I may have some fields at that point. So now it's put everything in here, and you'll notice that my food needs now are able to fit on the screen. I can go in here and go onto my next page. And it's given me a count of 41. And again, unfortunately, within that date range, I don't have anybody with any special needs. So I'm going to go in. And for those of you that haven't used custom fields before, if you have the ability to set up custom fields, it will be under System Configuration and Custom Fields. And if you do have custom fields set up, you will be able to go into the guest reservation, go into Change Stay, and on the Change Stay next to the Guest Info tab, you will find on here Custom Data, and this is where you can add your custom data. So some of you, if you don't have companies with local negotiated rates, but you had, for instance, a general corporate rate, but you wanted to capture that new name business so that you could do a report once a month and figure out if you're getting multiple reservations from the same company, and now it's time for your sales reps to go in and try and sell a local negotiated rate to that company. This is a great place for you to put a custom field in here, and then you can report by that custom field. So now we've done that, we can click on OK. So let's run that report again. So we're going to report wizard into our custom field reports, modify this report, and I'm going to go into my custom fields, and I'm also going to add in here that new corporate business field as well, and then run on finish. And go back up in here and select May the 1st to the end of the month. And now I can see how I get red, shell food allergy, room key. And what I'm seeing is that new corporate business is too long. So I may just decide to go back and change this and just call it new business or new company or company name, etc. So if I wanted to use this specifically for tracking new business, I could go into my expression in here and go in here and get rid of these fields and include just this field. So on my expression, I could go in here and perhaps go in here and say expression where, and then I could, oh, sorry, let's just not do this one. Let's do my corporate fields. So corporate business, expression where it is not empty. And that way it's going to show me anybody that has a corporate name. And then I would probably, in my grouping, group it by corporate name so that I could see every single company that's come in and how many reservations they have generated per company. So that's how to create a report using those kind of filters. Now, if we do a report that was going to be transaction-based, so let's pull up a transaction report and have a look at one of those. So this one is transaction-based, and it's basically credit cards on reservations. If we go to the next field, all of the same steps are followed, but you'll notice now we are including transaction group, transaction code, transaction type, and transaction reference and transaction source. So for those of you that I think you will be using transaction grouping is basically saying that this is a payment. Sorry, transaction grouping is showing you whether it's a room charge, an other charge, or a payment. A transaction type is showing you whether it is a payment or a charge. Then your transaction code is the code itself. The transaction type is going to, the transaction type is telling you whether it's a charge or a payment. The transaction reference is anything that you type in the reference field for the transaction code, and the transaction source will show you whether it was from the guest folio or whether it was from the city ledger that it was generated from. So that's what you're looking at when you're looking at transactions. Then in here, what we're saying is if the transaction group is payment and the reservation is arriving from this date to this date, then show them on this particular report. We have opted not to include transaction group. We only needed that for our filter purposes. Really don't care the arrival date. They don't care about the status, but they do need this information. Now, I can tell you right now, with this reference at 100, this is probably, when we run it, going to be way off the end of the page. But let's see what it does for us. Then they're not grouping anything together, and they're not ordering it in any particular order. So let's finish and run this and see what it gives us. So in here, it's given me a listing, and you'll notice that the reference is cutting off, so I may want to make my guest name smaller, and I may want to sort by transaction code to get all my visas together and all of my American Express. So let's go back in here and modify this. And we're going to go in here, and we are going to take that reference and make that down to, let's say, 30 characters. I'm going to take my guest name, change that down to 30 characters as well, and then I'm going to go to next and group by transaction code. Let's see the difference that that makes for this group. So I'm going to go back to April the 1st and then move on to May the 31st. And now what you'll see is I actually had the source over here that was dropping off completely because there wasn't enough space for it. I've now grouped my American Express and my visas together. And I've now got the payments, etc. So again, I could tweak this report again and maybe decide that I don't actually need this source ID, or I could make the guest name smaller again. I may want to say, transaction group and transaction type. I don't need both of those, so let me get rid of my transaction group. And I can just play with this until I can get it just the way I want. What you'll see up here is whatever my filter conditions are, they are also printing on the top of this report, so I can see what I was actually doing here. So I'm looking at them based on arrival date. So I am going to close down and show you very quickly that you can go into our help and RoomKey Smart Support. And RoomKey Smart Support, you can go in here and you can type in Report Wizard. And once you put in Report Wizard, you'll see how to create a Report Wizard using Report Wizard. And it's a PDF document. Once you open up, you have that gray bar that appears on the bottom, and that will allow you to go through and either print this document, or you can save it locally on a workstation, or if you have a shared drive with a knowledge base for RoomKey, you could save it to your knowledge base on RoomKey. You will also notice that page 2 to 14 is basically going over what I have just covered with you. And then we have some samples as well. So page 15 through to page 33 are showing you some samples of different reports that you can run. And these are great for you to go in and look at and get some ideas of how you can write expressions, what fields you can use to get certain reports. You'll also notice on page 34 is the permissions that you need in order to be able to go in and create the RoomKey accessibility on your login. I am going to take a moment to go over and look and see if we have any questions. If not, this will be a great time for you to ask me any questions. If you have any special reports that you want to create, that maybe you would like to get some guidelines on what should be included and perhaps how an expression could work, I will be more than happy to help you now if you'd like to ask some questions. I'm giving you a moment to type your questions in. Okay, so one of them is, how do you create a report with a certain rate name? So that's a great question. What you would want to do is make sure that when you create your report in the Report Wizard, let's call this one rate by rate name. I'm not going to show it anywhere yet. It's going to be a reservation-based report, and I'm going to put it into my general category. Going to go into the next one, put the name back in here, and go up in here and add my property. Then I'm going to go next. So the most important thing is, if you are looking for reservations associated with a particular reservation name, then you need to go down and pull in things like the guest name, the res ID, perhaps the arrival and departure date, and then make absolutely sure that you use the field that says rate name. Then if you also want to know the value of that rate, you could also pull in the actual rate itself. Once you've got those fields selected, for your expression, you basically want to go in, and if you want to be able to specify by date range, or if you just wanted, regardless of date range, you just wanted everything by a specific rate, you need to go in here and do expression rate. And if this is a hard report that's just looking for best available, then you would type equal to your best available rate. But if you wanted to leave this as a report where you could select the particular rate that you wanted at the time of running this report, then I would say equal to, and then the parameter here is enter rate name here. And that way it will allow you to change the rate name. So up here would be a fixed rate name. You would never be able to change it. But down here, you could go in and enter the rate name. And then perhaps you wanted to do it by arrival date. So again, you would use by arrival, greater than and equal to. And again, if it's a range, it's arrival from, and then and expression arrival less than, and it would be arrival to. And that's basically given me the ability to put a rate in and specify a date range that I'm looking for. And then when we go to next, I do want to print my guest name. Change that down to 30. Res ID. Now, if you've been running a long time, you may have to change the default to a larger number for your res IDs. I want my arrival date to be by month, day, no, not year, month, day, year. And then departure date, I'm not using, so maybe I'll just get rid of that. My rate names are usually no more than about 10 characters long, so let's make that 10, and that will be great. And maybe I'll sum my rates so that I can see how much revenue the rate is bringing in for me. Then I go to the next, and in this case, I'm not going to group it by anything, and I'm going to order it by arrival date. And then I'm going to finish this. Now, before I run this report, I just need to see the names of my reports in here. So I've got a AAA rate, so that's great. So I'm going to go into my general grouping. I'm going to see my rate by rate name, and I'm going to run this. And it's first going to ask me, so you have to go in here and enter the exact match. Now, I know I've made a mistake, so I'm going to go back and modify. And what I should have done in here is on my expression, instead of having it as equal to, I really wanted it to be like, so that it would match it. So I'm going to add a new statement in here, and my rate name is going to be oh, I know what the problem is. I'm sorry. I actually wanted my rate name. So rate name is like, and then enter rate here. So you'll notice that my operators changed based on whether it was a text field or whether it was basically a data field. So this is now going to allow me to do that. And finish. And let's go back in and run that report. So now I can type arrival from, let's do April the 1st to May the 30th. And now my AAA rate. And this must match with what your rate is called. So now here it shows me all my AAA. It's counting up my revenue for me. Now in this case, I probably want to go back in and change this revenue so that it has a dollar sign on it, so it just looks a little bit nicer. It's organized it by arrival date, which is what I asked it to do. Now, if I actually wanted it to break out so that it was just a section, excuse me, for April the 2nd, April the 3rd, April the 4th, that would be your grouping rather than your sort order by. So we'll just quickly go back in here, and where it's got rate, I'm going to change this and say I want this, and I also need probably 8 characters for that. And then I'm going to go in here and group by arrival date, and then run on finish. And again, arriving from April the 1st through to May the 30th on the AAA rate. I'm sorry, it's not liking how I changed that expression because it's going around in a circle. So I need to go back again and look at that expression and see what I've done wrong. So in the meantime, do you get the idea of what we're talking about, how you can go in? And it's not unusual when you build a rate, or build a report rather, to have to go in and have 3 or 4 tries at it to get it correct, which is why we do specify not to put the report in the actual show in menu until you've got it running exactly the way that you want it to do. I'm just going to check questions again as we're coming up on room charge type. Doesn't seem to be able to feel when building a reservation. No, the room charge type has to come from a transaction-based report. Now, room charge type, if it's a payment or if it's a charge or an other charge or room charges, those can be found in your balances section. But if you're looking to itemize by a rate charge type, you would have to make that a transaction-based report. Could you please show us how to create a daily running balance report? Okay, so Stanley, I know I met you when I did the installation at your hotel. I'm actually going to have to get more details to see how you define a running balances report. I don't know if you mean by GL or by transaction code or by ledger, so I will need to go in and I will call you directly back and ask you about that. I will actually, no, I'm going to send you an email just in case you're not in the office and you're doing this from home, because I know you're a night auditor. So I don't see any other questions. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to address them to me. My email is rbowen@roomkeypms.com, and I will be more than happy to answer any of those questions. Otherwise, our support department can help you, and you, as I've shown you, will be able to find the information also under the Help Smart Support. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. I hope this has been useful, and happy report writing. Thanks very much.